ba-da-dum, boom, boom, 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 ba-da-dum. They snuck into the kitchen when no one was looking.
Look out, Mama, it's Danger Man cooking.
Oh, no.
Hello and welcome to Danger Men Cooking. My name is Steven Schlissel.
And I am Gary Schmidt.
Today on Danger Men Cooking, Gary is going to be working with Lucinda Gregory, local author of the new cookbook, Begged, Borrowed, and Stolen from the Best, produced right here in Manchester. We're going to be cooking with her, talking about her book, and maybe a few surprises.
All right, Lucinda, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And we have your book here, Begged, Borrowed, and Stolen from the Best, and only the best, as I've seen it. So why don't you tell us something about it and how it evolved and what was your philosophy behind it?
Well, for years I've been collecting recipes from many from my own mother, who was a fabulous cook, and from chefs all over this country and all over Europe who've been kind enough to share. And that's how the book has evolved. It's been 20 years in process, and the longer we waited, the more material we gathered, so the more difficult it became. But we've pared it down to 300 pages, and it's a book to be enjoyed, to be read. It's not your traditional cookbook. It's a book for cooks and food fanatics. The theory behind it is to give you a lot of suggestions, things that you can enjoy doing. It's kind of cooking 101.
It's kind of like a book for people who have a good familiarity with food processing, cooking processes.
Exactly.
And they can look at the recipes and say, oh yeah, this is what it is. Let's do it. It's not overly complicated.
The woman who did who did all the work on this book with me, who was working on the copy, said, I can do this.
Right.
And then she'd go along and do another one. She'd say, oh, I can make this. And I thought, well, that's
Right.
what I had in mind.
Right. You have concise recipes, suggestions, and easy to follow.
And what else I've done is, if I have a recipe that's fairly complicated, I've also given an easier method for the same thing. It may not be quite as good, but it works.
Right, substitutions and so forth. And you have a background in food to begin with. You own and ran the Chocolate Barn in Shaftesbury?
Yes.
Right.
For 30-some years, and that was a wonderful experience. I had a really good time, but a 7-day-a-week operation is a very busy operation, and there's no time to put out a book.
Right.
But it was, and we had the foremost collection of antique chocolate molds in the country.
Molds. And you don't own that store anymore, but it's still running.
Yes,
right?
it is still running, and they're doing a beautiful job with it.
Good.
And it's all foods now. There are no antique.
All right, well, I think what we want to do is get started with the first recipe we're going to make today, and that is baked chocolate pudding. And so tell us something about this recipe, what's unique about it.
Well, this is one of the first recipes in my little black book. My mother was very kind in taking me often to food shows, and this was years and years ago because, as you know, I'm not a child anymore. And there was a cooking school in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and this was one of the recipes, this baked chocolate pudding, and it's become a standard in our house. And anytime we go anywhere, people will say, won't you bring the baked chocolate pudding for dessert? So I do.
And so the chocolate pudding is baked, and then you said it can be upside down, it's served upside down.
The ingredients we put in the bottom eventually become the top, and the top becomes a crust, which is the bottom. So it's an upside down pudding.
Right, upside down pudding. Good. Okay, so now I've put a little, I'll give this bowl to you. That's the flour. We have a cup of flour,
right,
a half a teaspoon of salt, and here's the brown sugar.
Right.
Half of this will be 3/4 cup brown sugar.
3/4 of a cup of brown sugar goes in here.
And you're sifting it all together. Is that
yes,
correct? Okay.
Right.
And then we have the baking powder, 2
2 teaspoons,
teaspoons.
right?
Okay. So we have cocoa. You can't forget the cocoa in anything chocolate. And we can always use
I put
a
in 2
generous amount of
teaspoons of
that.
baking powder.
Okay. Here's the cocoa.
This
4.5 teaspoons of cocoa.
So
And it calls for 2 tablespoons of butter, so I'm going to just melt a little butter in the pan. So the dry ingredients get sifted in. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we put in the milk and the melted butter and the vanilla.
Okay, we have a half a cup of milk.
We're doing Cooking 101.
Right. This is very good. And then teaspoon of vanilla. That's going to be like that. Okay, so we have this blended, and that's going to
Go right in
get
here.
mixed in with the flour and
tell me.
chocolate. Okay,
And cocoa.
there we
So
go.
You need a
There, you want to mix that up. And then we have added to that, nuts go in there too?
yes.
Okay,
Yep.
just like that.
So what we're mixing up here ends up going in the bottom of our baking dish, but it will be your sauce on top.
And this baking pan needs to be buttered a little bit, right?
Yeah, well buttered. I
was
don't
a
think
little
there's
wet.
any substitute for butter. You know,
Right.
It doesn't have to be lots of it, but there's no substitute
Right.
for butter. Incidentally, this is the most complicated of our whole dinner, so that's why we're doing it first.
And of course, most of the time when you're doing preparation for a party or whatever it is you're cooking, dessert normally gets prepared first, right?
Sure.
Because that normally takes the longest. And those are the things when you're cooking a party at home, you do the dessert. Okay. And so now we have one more step to put the cocoa mix over this.
Right.
Correct? And here's a bowl. Half a cup of sugar.
Yep, this
Right?
is
You measured that out, I think?
this
right.
is a wedding present from my college roommate. All these copper cups, and I use them every day at home.
And we have a
We have to do cocoa,
cocoa, 6 tablespoons. And
brown sugar.
Right?
Yep,
Throw that in there.
white sugar, brown sugar. Right?
Okay. And that gets mixed around, right?
Right.
So now we take this mixture that she's blending and we put it on top of the casserole that we've put the ingredients in, and then added to that on the very top of the mixture, entire mixture, is a cup of water, correct?
That's what does the trick. This is just a dry mixture that we're putting on the top, and that'll make the crust.
That'll make the crust, all right. Spread it around evenly,
There we go.
right? Now, you want to pour the water on since
That's
you've
a
done
cup?
this before?
Yep.
Cup. And that's it, right?
That's it.
That's it. Very easy. Looks good. It's going to be good. The top becomes the bottom.
Right.
The bottom
And-
becomes the top.
Exactly.
And we pop it in the
40
oven?
minutes in the oven.
40 minutes. Okay. All right, now, on to the pork loin. In your book, this is pork tenderloin with apples, right?
Right.
So,
With sauteed apples.
give us an idea of what we are going to do as far as the procedure is concerned.
The first thing we do is give the pork a nice browning.
Okay.
And then it goes into the oven. And it doesn't, pork tenderloin takes very little time, 5 to 10
Right.
minutes in the oven at 400. So that's what we do there.
Okay.
That's it.
And then we have apples that
These
you're
are
going
going
to be
to be-
slicing.
These are to be sauteed, and we'll sprinkle some turbinado sugar on them, and they're
Okay.
served red, green on our plate, so it makes
Okay.
a pretty plate.
With the pork tenderloin, and then we'll get into the potato pancakes. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, though, before we do any sort of cooking of the pork, I want to explain about trimming the pork tenderloin, because for a lot of people who like pork tenderloin, this is really an essential point that needs to be made. When you go to the store and you buy a pork tenderloin, for the most part, there's going to be on the tenderloin what they call a silver skin. And this silver skin is essentially sinew. And if you don't take that off, when you bake the pork tenderloin as a whole, it's going to curl up because that sinew is tough muscle material, and so it has to be taken out. So I'm just going to show how we do that. So here's the tenderloin, and you can see on here is a little loose fat and the sinew. So the first thing to do is just to pull off whatever kind of fat you can do with your hands and strip that off the tenderloin. Then you take a nice knife and you poke that underneath the sinew. And then you take the knife and you raise it up a little bit at an angle going to the direction that you're going to take the skin off of. So we have the knife in there, going to raise the knife up like that and then slowly take that off. And then do the same thing going the opposite direction, like that. And you do that until you get rid of all of that sinew. And as Lucinda said, when you roast this tenderloin, it's going to take just probably 20 minutes, 15 minutes at the most. Okay, here's the first tenderloin that's done. And while I'm doing this, Lucinda is slicing apples. The apples have been cored already. And she's going to then saute them in the pan with a little butter. Okay?
Correct.
All right, the other tenderloin we're going to get into, take the loose fat off. And by the way, this is the same procedure, exact procedure for a beef tenderloin. You have to make sure that that sinew is taken off. Otherwise, you'll ruin the piece of meat. And we have some butter in the pan, and she's taking the apples, and we're going to saute them, and then you're going to coat them with a turbinado sugar after you flip them?
Right.
Okay, so now to saute the pork loin, we're going to put a little, we have some olive oil in a pan, little pepper on here, and the salt. Does that look good?
Yes, fine.
Okay, and put that in. Pepper again, the second one.
This is the easiest meal in the world, and it's great for company because it's done simply and quickly.
Yeah, pork tenderloin is a favorite for a lot of people, and it's so easy to prepare. There's sometimes the less you do to it, the better off we are. You know.
I think so.
So once the pork gets brown on the one side, we just roll it over. You can see how nicely that looks.
That's perfect.
Do the same thing for the other one.
Some people just put their pork tenderloin in the oven as it is, but it really needs that nice crust on the outside.
Right. Most of the time when you are dealing with larger pieces of meat like this, it is really best just to leave them whole.
Yes.
Like a roast chicken. If you roast the chicken whole, bake it, it comes out much more tender than as if you would roast like a leg by itself or in a pan. And the same thing here is, you know, we're going for flavor, and when we roast it, it seals the juices in nicely. Easy to do.
That looks beautiful.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to place in here some onions. And I have some julienne carrots. That will be nice. And whenever you're roasting a piece of meat or sauteing anything in a pan, if it looks like the oil has been soaked up by the product, you know, don't hesitate to put some more in. And we're going to flip this over one more time to the side that has not been seared, and you can see how
it's almost ready to eat at
it
this
is,
point.
right.
That's the best part about it.
Okay, now Lucinda is flipping over the apples. They look very nice. They're brown nicely. And now what's the story with the turbinado sugar?
It adds a little texture, and two, it adds some flavor.
Okay, and when do you put that on, or?
Once the side, well, we can put it on now, and then we'll just keep them warm in the oven.
All right, let's do that.
Whatever. This is turbinado sugar, or some people call it demamora. It's all the same thing.
All right, go ahead and place those on the plate, and then that's be nice. And while she's doing that, we have a little wine here. This is a Pinot Gris, and we're going to add some to the pork loin. And really the rule of thumb in cooking, wouldn't you agree, Lucinda, is that the wine that you're using to cook should be
good to drink,
at least. Good, right. So what we're going to do now is what they call deglazing the pan. So we're going to take a little wine and put it into the bottom of the pan, and you can see that the wine picks up the juices from the bottom of the pan that has been created by roasting the meat. And we're just going to place a few of these carrots and onions on top of the meat so that when we put it into the oven, it'll keep things moist and bake into the meat. All right, and I'm going to place this into the oven. The oven is at 400, okay. I'll crank it up. And it should take
10 minutes at the most.
10 minutes.
5 to 10 minutes.
400 it is. Okay. Those are going to go great with the potato pancakes. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is make a batch of potato pancakes. Start by peeling some of these potatoes.
In my household, potato pancakes were a nice treat at the end of a week when there wasn't much left in the larder. And potato pancakes came out with applesauce or with and bacon or sausage, and it made a nice meal.
So the recipe that Lucinda has in the book calls for grated potatoes mixed with some onion. And the onion, what I'm going to do first is just to soften it up a little bit, put a little oil in the pan. This is olive oil. Throw some diced onions into the pan. Let them become transparent. And so we're going to have the potatoes, onions. We have a couple of eggs, a little bit of flour, and salt, correct?
Correct.
Sometimes when I make this recipe at home, I put them all in a Cuisinart. Have you ever done that?
I don't use a Cuisinart. I do it this way, the old-fashioned way. But there's nothing wrong with using the Cuisinart. I'm just an old-fashioned cook.
Okay, we have our onions. They're brown, they're transparent. I'm going to put them in with the potato. And why don't you take these eggs and whip them? Okay, the potatoes are grated. Along with the potato, we're going to go with a little pepper, teaspoon of pepper, and a little salt. And then the egg gets put into that. And we're going to blend this all together with a little flour. I would say maybe a quarter of a cup. This, for measurement's sake, we had 3 potatoes. And I think, to give an exact measurement, 3.5 inches long. 3.5 inch long potatoes.
What kind of potatoes do we use today?
These are golden.
They're golden.
Russets.
Golden russets.
And so we have 2 eggs, 3.5 inch long potatoes.
I love it.
An onion, salt, pepper, 2 eggs. Okay, and we blend that together. And of course, the egg and flour help bind everything together. And that looks about right, do you think, according to
Perfect.
your recipe?
Yeah, it should look rustic. They should look homemade.
And then we're back to more oil, olive oil. Okay, and we're going to place a nice lump of potatoes, and
They look perfect.
I normally just kind of prick them a little bit. Okay.
They cook a little better, and they look a little.
Yeah, right.
They look
They
better.
kind of look like potato nests in a way, right?
They do.
Something like this will take about 2 minutes on each side.
Doesn't take long.
Right. Okay, so why don't we flip over the potato pancakes, see what kind of shape they're in.
Pretty
Oh,
nice.
look
Oh,
good. All right.
this is just the way they should look.
So that looks good, and they have to cook just another minute.
Minute or so on the
of
other
that,
side.
right? Okay. So here are the apples. Why don't you arrange them on the plates how you wish?
Generally,
That
it's
looks
nice
good.
red, green, red, green. That makes a
Yeah.
pretty plate.
Yeah. Should we put 3 on?
I think so.
Three is always a good number in food.
Well, I'm talking to one of the best here, so he knows.
All right, and a little potato pancake here.
Right?
And I brought a little sour cream. Maybe we could top that potato pancake with the sour cream. I think that would be nice, right?
Yes. Very nice. Oh, my.
And now we need to bring out the pork loin. Look how nice that looks.
Oh, it looks wonderful.
And you can always tell if things are cooked enough by the firmness of the meat. We're talking, this feels pretty good right now. And when I cut the pork tenderloin, I'm normally going to cut it on a bias cut, which means on an angle.
That's the way.
Gives a little nicer look.
Oh, look how nice. And it should be pinky inside, too.
Right.
Modern pork doesn't need to be cooked to death.
And we're going to lay that out like that.
Oh, that's
and
beautiful,
I'm just going to go
Gary.
to the other side.
Yeah. Oh, that came out very well.
And we're going to do the same thing here. And so now,
You see what I mean by a simple meal, though? It is a simple meal.
and now we can't forget the onions and carrots. I'm going to line them next to the pork and the potato pancakes. Just like that. And last but not least is the jus from the wine.
From the wine and, yes.
And the meat itself. Like that. And there we have it. One for you and one for me. Last but not least, the chocolate pudding.
Now that's what's on the top, and that's going to be the crust that goes on the bottom.
I have some heavy cream, and we're going to whisk this.
And see, all the good stuff that's in the bottom goes on the top.
When you're whisking cream from scratch, the trick is not to get tired. So, you got to keep your elbow loose and keep the shoulder loose. And we're going to put a nice little dollop of whipped cream there.
Perfect.
And a little dollop of whipped cream there.
I think I see a lot of people licking their chops.
Very nice. Okay, and that is the meal from Lucinda Gregory's cookbook, begged, borrowed, and stolen from the best. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that was marvelous. The smell of this meal got me out of the control room, and I see the wine is already open. Yesterday, Gary and I went to Kamalo's Wine and Antique to talk to Barbara Kamalo, who suggested the wine today for our meal. And we have a short clip of that which we're going to show. And here it is.
I'm here now at Kamalo's Antiques and Fine Wine Store in Manchester. And I'm with Barbara, one of the owners. And I just want to say that this is probably one of the most interesting stores in Manchester. It has a very interesting collection of antiques and a very, very interesting and affordable collection of fine wines. So if you are ever here, please come by and stop and see Barbara and her husband Clark. So Barb, we're cooking roast pork tenderloin with apples, sauteed with onions and garlic, and we're finishing it off with a little bit of potato pancake.
Ooh.
So what do you have to suggest for us?
That sounds absolutely lovely. I wish I was going to be there. What I always like to suggest to you, Gary, is both white and a red, because there's some people who won't drink red, some people won't drink white. So if we go into the white section, a Pinot Gris from Alsace, which is Strasbourg area, which is where I was born, has a little bit of spice, a little bit of apple fruit to it. And
Perfect.
It's dry. Some people confuse dry with fruit. They think fruit means sweet. It's not. It's as dry as a bone, and it would go lovely with the apples.
Okay, can I see that?
Yes, you may, my
Thank
dear.
you.
Don't you be drinking it.
No.
And for those who want some red wine, we've decided to do a Pinot Meunier from Carneros, and that is going to be almost like a Pinot Noir, but a little bit more oomph for it. You're going to have, Pinot Noir is the grape that goes with everything, absolutely everything, except for steak. So this will go perfectly with your pork and blend well with the apples and the wine and the thyme that you're planning on doing. So I wish I could be there.
Well,
I never have any fun.
We're also having some chocolate for dessert, so I think that will go
perfectly.
just go right.
That'd be lovely. Sounds great.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
So we're back again, and
now we're going to make a toast.
We're going to make a toast. Would you like white or red, Lucinda?
White, please.
White for Lucinda.
And I'm going to try the Pinot. See how that is.
Thank you.
Stephen?
Okay, so to the success of your cookbook,
Yes.
to everybody at home that's learned a little something today, we've got some beautiful food. The crew is just chomping at the bit, and thank you. And until next time,
Keep
on cooking.
Boom, 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 ba-da-dum, 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 boom, boom, ba-da-dum. They snuck into the kitchen when no one was looking.
Look out, Mama, it's Danger Man cooking.
Oh, now.
But first, Gary, you remember at the end of the last show when I told you that we'd be cooking pork on this show when pigs fly?
The flying pigs. Yeah, of course I remember that.
Here we go.
Okay.